Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Eerie News, and today is October 8th, 2023, Sunday, October 8th, 2023. And let's get on to the first story. And this is out of Stranger Than Fiction Stories, and it's titled The Phantom of Bel Air. Ethel Allen disappeared, and eventually many believe justice failed her. But justice can be served in many ways. The Volstead Act was repealed in 1933. The production of illegal alcohol and the money tied into the vices found in speakeasies still floated through the backwaters and scrub hammocks of Central Florida. A raid on the Blind Tiger, a pool room in Rockledge, yielded 12 gallons of moonshine and case liquor. Authorities found more 160 proof hooch at the owner's house. Think of that. 160 proof? Whoa. In the early 1930s, Jack C. Allen came from Pennsylvania and opened a vending machine business named Allen's Amusements. He invested in a gasoline filling station and built a small restaurant at a lonely place on Dixie Highway that skirted Florida's east coast through Rockledge. The land was just a ditch that was filled in. It sat next to the FEC tracks, and the building would shake every time a train thundered by. Then in December 1933, with the end of Prohibition, he decided to expand and created Jack's Tavern, a two-story eatery where he served liquor, played music on the jukebox, and served locals and travelers alike. One of the locals that spent time there was Ethel Allen, a pretty 18-year-old. It's unknown if she was related to the owner. In November 1934, Jack's Tavern was opened less than a year and still being remodeled in order to serve the increased business when Ethel Allen disappeared. A ring of turkey buzzards soaring overhead and lighting on the ground attracted the attention of truckers from Alabama. They found a mutilated body on the shores of the Indian River north of Ugali near Rocky Water Tourist Camp. The decomposed remains were identified by Alma Finney, who owned the house in Cocoa where Ethel boarded. The Finneys owned a rooming house above the Walters billiard parlor. Identification was confirmed by a tattoo mark on the victim's right thigh above her knee, which displayed a rope circle around the initials BK. Mrs. Finney also confirmed a gold ring set with a ruby belonged to the girl. The body demonstrated marks of extreme brutality. Her throat had been cut, and she had a knife wound on her forehead and at the base of the skull. The right side of the face had been crushed, and the upper teeth and the part of the jawbone were missing. One leg was almost gone, and the murderer had tried to dispose of the body by burning it and then throwing it in the river. Only a patch of hair remained on the back of the head. She was nude except for a piece of stocking around the ankle of one foot. Her clothing was never found, only her purse with $26 inside of it. The last time Ethel Allen was seen, she was getting into a car with a man known as William H. Wilson. She was also seen drinking with him, and witnesses said he was taking her to visit relatives in Wauchula. Wilson disappeared from Rockledge after Ethel's murder. By November 1934, the police received a tip that Wilson was seen on Flagler Street in Miami, driving a new Ford two-door sedan with a Pennsylvania license plate. Patrols were sent throughout Miami's downtown area and even into Miami Beach without any success. It turned out Wilson was one of many aliases used by Willard Borton. In 1935, he was indicted in the murder of Ethel Allen. By then, it had been determined they were constantly in each other's company before Ethel's body was discovered. At that time, he was known around town as Jersey Devil Borton, so it seemed there were those in Rockledge who knew his real name. The fates were not kind to the Allen family. In January 1935, a few months after Ethel's murder, they lost a daughter, Emily, aged 24. In March 1938, they lost Edith, who was 16 years old when she died, just a month after she had given birth to a baby girl. In 1939, they lost a son, Leroy. However, behind the scenes and thousands of miles away, events were unfolding to answer the question of who had viciously killed Ethel. Willard Borton had prudently fled to the East Coast, but the law caught up to him in California in 1939. He'd become a jewel thief known as the Phantom of Bel Air. He had stolen millions of dollars in jewels from the homes of Hollywood movie stars, such as Gary Cooper and Barbara Stanwyck among them. He was also wanted for various robberies in New Jersey and had also broken out of prison in that state. Upon his arrest in California, the case was reviewed in Florida in order to determine if there was sufficient evidence for an extradition warrant to prosecute him for Ethel's murder. Sheriff Roy F. Roberts, who investigated Ethel's murder, a tavern proprietor, two former waitresses in a restaurant where Wilson was accustomed to eat, a minister who had seen the man about Rockledge, where he occupied a small cottage, and three acquaintances of Ethel were questioned during a review of the case. Purposely, the name of these persons was omitted from the article. In California, Borton used the alias of Ralph Graham. However, per the FBI's fingerprints matched up with Borton's and his picture did as well. Borton had even married a woman named Charlotte, using the alias of Ralph Evans. He pled not guilty and not guilty by reason of insanity for the charges of stealing approximately $2 million in jewels. In May 1939, Borton was sentenced to life imprisonment as a habitual criminal after pleading guilty to robbing the home of Carol Lombard and two other persons. Apparently, it was determined there was not enough evidence to bring him back to Florida to face murder charges. In 1942, he escaped from Folsom Prison along with two other prisoners but was recaptured. He tried again in 1947, but the plan was foiled by deputies. Ethel might not have been given justice by the law, but it caught up with Borton nonetheless when his throat was slit by another prisoner in Folsom in 1949. Borton worked as the prison barber, and it was unknown why he was attacked by several prisoners that also used the hatchet on him. Fred Evans, one of the prisoners who killed him, had been sent to Folsom in 1941 after killing a man named Fred Silvers, who lived in a hobo jungle in Santa Cruz. They had argued over Evans' association with a youth. Evans met his own grisly end 2 months later in December 1949 when he was killed by burglar Frank Marcus, who knifed him in the back. So here, Borton gets killed by an inmate, and then 2 months later, the guy that kills him gets killed by another prisoner. Talk about karma. Eventually, two other men would also be charged with the murder of Willard Borton. John Allen and Lewis Smith got the death sentence for killing Borton. Their sentences were upheld by the Supreme Court. They had also been described as ringleaders in a San Quentin condemned row mutiny. In April 1951, they got a stay of execution after it was appealed based on the claims that two other prisoners had committed the murder and that their conviction was based on testimony of another prisoner who was known to be mentally ill. It won them a reprieve for 6 years, but in February 1957, they were executed in San Quentin's gas chamber. It might have taken 15 years, but Ethel got her revenge on the Phantom of Bel Air. But for some reason, this did not soothe her spirit, as she is believed to be haunting Jack's Tavern ever since. Yes, Jack's Tavern is still in existence under a different name, and supposedly she still haunts it, or who they think is her. So there you go. All right, on to the next story. This is out of AP. This is pretty gross, but interesting. It's titled "Police Found 115 Bodies at Colorado Green Funeral Home While Investigating Putrid Smells." By the way, for anybody who wants to know what a green funeral home, this is when, the rage now is that you give your body, instead of cremation, it's like, you use it as fertilizer, that kind of thing. But this is what can happen. This is in Canyon City, Colorado. The awful smell seeped from a Colorado town for days, followed by a report that made oops. Okay, let me start at the beginning. The awful smell seeped from a neglected building in a small Colorado town for days, followed by a report that made police take a closer look at the Green Funeral Operator Storage Facility. Inside, they made a gruesome discovery: at least 115 decaying bodies. Investigators were tight-lipped Friday about exactly what they found inside the Return to Nature Funeral Home in Penrose, Colorado, but their plans to bring in teams that usually deal with airline crashes, coroners from nearby jurisdictions, and the FBI pointed to a grim mess. A state document, meanwhile, alleged funeral home owner John Halford tried to conceal the improper storage of corpses. He claimed he was doing taxidermy at the facility, according to the state suspension letter dated Thursday. Halford acknowledged that he had a problem at the property. The Colorado Office of Funeral Home and Crematory Registration letter said the document did not elaborate on the taxidermy and alleged improper storage of remains, but the facility's registration has been expired since November. No one has been arrested or charged. The text messages to the funeral home seeking comment went unanswered. No one at the business picked up the phone, and there was no working voicemail. Funeral home officials were cooperating as investigators sought to determine any criminal wrongdoing. Fremont County Sheriff Alan Cooper said at a news conference where he called the scene inside the building horrific. On Friday, a sour, rotten stench still came from the back of the building where windows were broken. Coroner officials from Fremont County and nearby El Paso County parked their trucks outside and discussed among themselves as they walked around the building. Some identifications would require taking fingerprints, finding medical or dental records, and DNA testing in a process that could take several months. Fremont County Coroner Randy Keller said families will be notified as soon as possible after body identification, he added. Family members who have used the funeral home were asked to contact investigators. As the news broke, Mary Simons, 47, couldn't help but wonder if her husband was inside the building. Daryl Simons had lung cancer and died of pneumonia in August, a few months shy of their 13th anniversary. Mary Simons hired Return to Nature Funeral Home to cremate him, but the ashes never arrived. And now, let me tell you something. This is disturbing on a lot of levels. Besides the fact that he was keeping these bodies there, um, taxidermy. What was it? I'm telling you, and I've said it before in other stories, that there's an underground network of people that buy and sell body parts, and not just for medical or anatomical reasons. They do them for collection purposes or for a cult. And I'm thinking, um, and then what a lot of people realize is that unless maybe this, eh, if people are being, I don't know how this person can be prosecuted based on what, because as you see, he hasn't, there's been no arrests. All right. So sometimes there's, as far as the crimes that people think with this, when it's a dead body, it's not as severe as you think. Unless, of course, basically, it's when uh, he's charged people for cremation and obviously he didn't carry it out. This lady didn't get the ashes. I know some people turn to these services because they're either free or very low cost. And if they are limited funds, then they go around and they do this donation. I don't know what the case is with this service, but caveat emptor, buyer beware. All right, let's go back to Stranger Than Fiction stories. And the next story is The Curse of the Clown. And if eyes are windows to the soul, then what are paintings produced by a human? What if that human is a killer? Many murderers have turned to producing art during the time they are incarcerated. Mostly the art is bad, and only the notoriety of their names brings it any attention. In some instances, whether knowingly or subconsciously, they give a glimpse into what feeds their souls. First one, John Wayne Gacy. Gacy was arrested in 1978. By then, he had sodomized and murdered 33 young men and boys, all between the ages of 14 and 21. 5 of his victims are still unidentified. He became a master of leading a double life. When he was 18, he became involved in politics and worked for a local Democratic Party candidate. He held numerous jobs, and in the meantime, he joined the local JCs. He married in 1964 and worked for his father-in-law, who owned several Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants. Even though he was married, he engaged in homosexual encounters. By 1967, he had 2 children and was named vice president of the Waterloo JCs in Iowa. In August of that year, he sexually assaulted the 15-year-old son of a fellow JC and local politician. As a result of the arrest, he was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, with indicators he was likely to come into conflict with society. In 1968, he was convicted of sodomy and sentenced to 10 years. His wife divorced him and she was granted sole custody of his 2 children, along with their home, property, and alimony. He never saw her or his children again. He served only 18 months of his sentence when he was granted parole. He married his second wife in 1972. She had two daughters from a previous marriage. 3 years later, he told her he was bisexual, and then one day he told her this would be the last time they had intercourse. She observed her husband bringing young men to the garage. She found gay pornography as well. They divorced in 1976. During these years, he dressed up as either Pogo the Clown or Patches the Clown, and he would perform at fundraising events, parades, and visiting hospitalized children, which was ironic because he was killing boys and young men at the same time. He continued in his work with Democratic Party politics. Gacy was caught when investigators were tipped off that Gacy had offered a job to Robert Priest, 15, who had gone missing. Police found he had a criminal record that involved sodomy, and a search warrant was granted for his property. Authorities found 26 bodies in the crawl space of his house. 3 were buried somewhere on the property, and 4 were thrown into the Des Plaines River. He typically garroted his victims to death with a hammer handle. Some victims convulsed for an hour or two before dying. He was accused of killing 33 young men, but he told investigators that the body count was as high as 45. A retired police officer said he had reason to believe there might be victims buried in the grounds of an apartment building on West Miami Avenue in Chicago, where Gacy was a caretaker for several years. After his arrest, Gacy named some of his employees as participating in the murders. He pointed a finger at Philip Pask, who was a close associate of John Norm, who during the 1970s operated a nationwide sex trafficking ring based in Chicago known as the Delta Project. There was speculation Gacy was tied to this trafficking ring as well. After his arrest in 1978, the jury took less than 2 hours to find him guilty and sentence him to death. His execution was set for 1980, but he would spend 14 years on death row. This is when he began to paint. He was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994, and his last words were, "Kiss my ass." The same year of his execution, his attorney auctioned off his artwork. Some of it was purchased and 25 were destroyed in a bonfire attended by 300 people, including some family members of Gacy's victims. His brain was removed and is in the possession of Helen Morrison, a witness for the defense at Gacy's trial who had interviewed him, and other serial killers in a study of common personality traits of violent sociopaths. His body was cremated. Gacy's pathology has been connected to an abusive relationship with his alcoholic father. He was molested when he was 5 by a neighborhood girl who was 15 years old. When he was 8, he was molested by a contractor working on a building next to his house. In 2021, Cook County identified another Gacy victim through the use of DNA. His name was Francis Wayne Alexander, and he moved to Chicago in 1975. His marriage ended in a divorce a few months later. His family lost touch with him, but had no idea he was victim number 5, found under Gacy's house in 1978. DNA taken from a molar was connected to a family member in 2020, and after 40 some years, they found out what had become of him. They never suspected this was his fate, since during those years Alexander had cut off communication with them because he wanted to be left alone. His family was from Long Island, and he is interred in Oak Ridge Glen Oak Cemetery in Cook County, Illinois. Gacy's artwork was first exhibited in 2011 at the Contemporary Art Center Gallery in Las Vegas. Titled Multiples, the artwork of John Wayne Gacy, it was received with negative criticism. A claim that proceeds of sales would go to the National Center for Victims of Crime would turn out to be untrue. The organization stated, quote, "We believe the idea of benefiting from an activity relating to such egregious and violent crimes would be in poor taste to the extreme. Out of respect for the victims' families, we have not agreed and would not agree to accept any contribution that comes from the sale of John Wayne Gacy's work, which he did while in prison for torturing and murdering young boys and men." End quote. In 2011, the gallery's website described the collection this way. Quote, 74 pieces will be put up for sale at the Las Vegas exhibition. They include pencil drawings and audio recordings and painting of skulls, clowns, and the 7 dwarfs from the Snow White fairy tale. Included among the collection is an oil painting entitled Dahmer's Skull, which is priced at $2,000 and was inspired by serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. But perhaps the most controversial piece is a self-portrait entitled Goodbye Pogos, listed at $4,500. Gacy reportedly gave these portraits to close pen pals at the end of his life. End quote. In 1999, Johnny Depp spoke out about owning Pogo the Clown. He said, quote, "They told me when I got it the proceeds went to a charity or to the victim's family or something, but I found out that wasn't the case, so I got rid of it. It was too dark anyway. Fascinating from a psychological point of view, but that was really dark stuff." End quote. In 2001, musician Nikki Stone bought Gacy's self-portrait Pogo the Clown. By 2005, the allure had more than worn off. In fact, he wanted to get rid of the piece. He'd bought it for $3,000 from murderabilia merchant Arthur Rosenblatt, and he suffered for it in ways he had not anticipated. His dog had died, and his mother was diagnosed with cancer. He'd never even had the opportunity to hang it. A friend stored the painting for him, and the friend's neighbor was killed in an auto accident. Another friend who tried to help by keeping the painting attempted suicide. In 2005, it was turned over to consignment art dealer and owner of Kaleidoscope Tattoo and Art in Cambridge, Sean McCarran. McCarran felt that he was inured from bad luck since his mother, Maureen, was stabbed to death in her home in 1999. His brother Mark had also been stabbed but made it to a nearby fire station to get help. A man who had been drinking all night at a party across from the home was eventually arrested. He knew her socially and had done work at the house in the weeks before she was killed. In 2002, the perpetrator was found guilty of first-degree murder, which carried a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. McCarran said of the painting, quote, "I'm not afraid of it. I don't believe in the hocus pocus and the bad mojo that comes with it. Every murderer in the world should be rolled into one. They all owe me. People do ask to see it. They get a chill through their body. I've had people say, 'Oh my God, put that back in the box.'" End quote. In 2020, Zach Bagans purchased some of Gacy's paintings from Tammy Hoff, Gacy's stepdaughter. She had received many of the paintings while he was on death row. Gacy's paintings are known for being especially high in demand, going from anywhere from $6,000 to $175,000. One he did of his house, which emphasized the cross space where he hid his victims, is the most sought after Gacy illustration. In 2022, it was reported a set of Gacy's paintings were up for auction. They had been found in a cupboard in a house in England. The owners of the property had died and the son found them. The three paintings had been there for decades, and he had no idea his parents had purchased them. He believed they were acquired when his parents toured the United States. They are titled Christ, Skull Clown, and Hi Ho in the Winter '92, and all are signed by Gacy. They were set to be auctioned by Mullock's Auctioneer in Shropshire. They fetched the Christ 1,100 pounds, Skull Clown 1,200 pounds, and they were sold in the first auction in June of 2022. Hi Ho in the Winter '92 sold in July for 900 pounds. The question begs to be asked why they were kept secreted away in a cupboard gathering dust for so many years. Again, I don't know. Even if you put away the superstition, like that guy said, the bad mojo, I don't get it. Why would you want art from somebody like this? And let's face it, I don't know. I'm no, but I look at these and this looks like something a grade schooler could have done. I mean, I don't get it. It's not even good art. It doesn't look like good art. So again, in other words, if it wasn't for the fact of who the artist is, nobody would say, "Wow, that's crappy art." So there you go. Okay, our next story is out of UPI, and it is titled "Missouri Holding Sixth Birthday Party for Two-Headed Snake." Check it out, especially those that are watching this. It's a two-headed rattlesnake. The Missouri Department of Conservation announced it will hold a sixth birthday party for one of its rarest animals, a two-headed snake. The female two-headed western rat snake named Tiger Lily was found by a family in Stone County in autumn of 2017 and was donated to the Department of Conservation's Shepherd of the Hills Conservation Center. The department announced Tiger Lily's birthday will be held at scenic overlook parking lot of MDC's Ruth and Paul Henning Conservation Area in Branson. MDC Interpretive Center Manager Allison Blake said Tiger Lily is now nearly 5 feet long. Both heads want to eat, but they only have one esophagus, Blake said in the birthday party announcement. We put a small cup over one head while the other eats, then switch. Otherwise, both would be trying to grab the same mouse. And she survived. It survived. It's there you go. Yeah, it's grown and it's thriving and all right. There you go. Something out of you would see at Ripley's Believe It or Not. So let's go back to Stranger Than Fiction Stories. And this is titled Sarah's Sins. We're going to go back in history here on this one. Most people are familiar with the notorious murder committed in Fall River, Massachusetts by the axe-wielding Lizzie Borden in 1892. However, there was another crime just as heinous that occurred 60 years before. In 1832, Sarah Maria Cornell, 30, died from what was assumed to be suicide by hanging. She was found fastened to a stake pole used to dry hay. Her reason for ending her life was thought to be the shame of being pregnant and unwed. She was buried but didn't stay there for long. She was last seen when she left the Fall River manufactory where she worked around 6 p.m. the day before the discovery of her body. Whispered rumors were that Reverend Ephraim Avery had driven Sarah to her act of self-destruction, or that perhaps she was murdered due to her pregnancy and the scandal it would cause. The body was exhumed and it had marks of violence. The small cord around her neck was examined, and the form of the knot, which had cut in entirely around the throat and neck, could not have happened if she had hung herself. She also had marks upon her cheek in which the murderer placed his foot or knee upon it as he tightened the cord. There were portions of skin stripped from her legs where she was dragged from the spot when she was strangled and where she was found suspended. The farm belonged to Captain Durfee, located in Tiverton, Rhode Island, a little south of Fall River Village. During that evening when she was killed, a teamster passing through the area heard groaning but assumed it was a dying animal and took no further notice. Sarah came from a good family. However, her parents' marriage was unhappy. Her mother, Lucretia Leffingwell's future was assured since she belonged to a genteel family from Woodstock, Connecticut. However, she fell in love and eloped with James Cornell, a paper cutter employed by her father. Against her family's wishes, she married him in 1796. She failed to see he was just a fortune hunter. During the next 6 years, the marriage produced 3 children, James, Lucretia, and Sarah. Urged by her husband, Lucretia asked her father for money, until one day he cut her off. Cornell deserted his wife and their children at her parents' doorstep. It was said he left to the Ohio frontier. The family never heard from him again. The Leffingwell family did not forgive Lucretia for her disobedience. James and Lucretia were brought up by relatives. James would become a merchant, and Lucretia married Grindal Rawson, a tailor. It was only Sarah, who was an infant, who stayed with her mother. When she was 11 years old, she went to live with her Aunt Joanna. During the 1820s, Sarah worked as a tailor but found she could make more money by working in the textile factories as a weaver. These mills were proliferating throughout New England. She did not find a husband and soon resorted to petty theft. Her reputation suffered for it. She drifted from town to town, engaging in sexual adventures with different men. She tried changing her name in an effort to outrun her reputation, only to once again commit another indiscretion. These were times when a single woman seen walking by herself with a man could damage her standing in society. Before her death, she had been expelled from the Methodist Church for being a bad character and wanted desperately to be reinstated. Sarah's misconduct led to her being an outcast. At some point, she realized she could not escape the damage done to her name. She tried to make amends with her mother and sister. She joined the Congregational Church and then the Episcopal Methodist Church, where she attended their tent meetings. In 1828, she arrived in Lowell, Massachusetts, which had a thriving industrial center. She carried with her a certificate of membership in the Methodist Church, which could help her secure employment. For a woman with a damaged reputation, this could mean whether she starved or ate. Sarah found work and had to live in a boarding house owned by the factory, but gossip of her past still hounded her. Ephraim Kingsbury Avery was born to Amos and Abigail Avery in 1799. He married Sophia Wells. They had 6 children, 4 which lived into adulthood. He had no wish to follow in his father's footsteps as a farmer, so he studied as a doctor, but didn't complete the lessons. From there, he worked at a general store, followed by a job as a school teacher. Ultimately, he moved on to become a minister. Becoming a Methodist minister did not require special training, only that the person accept church discipline and that they could preach. Avery was a handsome man who swayed female converts. It was in 1830 that Sarah and Avery's paths crossed, when she decided to seek employment as a servant. She applied at the home of Reverend Ephraim Avery. 3 years before he would face a murder trial, Avery already had a troubled reputation among his flock. He was known for reporting on their bad behavior and pointing out their loose morals. The hierarchy in the Methodist Church allowed him to grant or deny a person a certificate of membership, which could end with banishment or the inability to find work. Later during his trial, Avery denied hiring her, but a witness came forward to say that Avery's wife dismissed the woman being Sarah, after 1 week because she didn't like the attention her husband gave her. Sarah returned to the mills, but she attempted to get a good reference from Avery, perhaps in hopes of securing another job as a domestic. However, this seemed to go against his insistence of discrediting those he considered amoral. No doubt he was attracted and repelled by Sarah. He told her he would give her a certificate if she made a statement describing her bad behavior. She gave him what she wanted, and she gave him what he wanted, and he gave her the certificate. But since now he had proof of her sins, he initiated a church trial against her. A bout of a sexually transmitted disease urged her from the town, and she drifted to other places, looking for a place to work. In hand, she had Avery's certificate. He would give a full history of Sarah's sordid past to any minister inquiring about her. Eventually, Sarah went to live with her sister in Woodstock. Her brother-in-law employed her as a seamstress in his shop. Her only troubles were the thought that Reverend Avery held her letters of confession, which he could use against her at any time. She wrote him several times to Bristol, Rhode Island, where Avery now lived. In August of 1832, there was a Methodist tent meeting in Thompson, Connecticut. She possibly told him she would be looking for him there, and he tried everything to get her thrown out from the grounds. However, according to Sarah, he met her later in the forest nearby. She agreed to have sexual intercourse with him in exchange for her letters. During the trial, her pregnancy coincided with a child conceived around this time. Their roles had changed. He gave her the letters back, but now she had his child in her belly. A lawyer suggested she move to Fall River, close to Bristol, so she could negotiate support from him. She found work at the Fall River Manufactory. The only thing he had was the prestige of his standing as a Methodist minister. When she begged him not to accuse her once more of loose morals, he responded that he had done nothing and that she had destroyed herself. On October 20th, 1832, Avery disappeared from a religious meeting for about an hour. Sarah confessed he met with her in order to give her a reference to secure employment with Dr. Thomas Wilbur. Dr. Wilbur examined Sarah, and no doubt he questioned her about the paternity of her child. He was very troubled when she told him that Avery had told her to take 30 drops of oil of tansy, which could induce a miscarriage. The dose would have also killed her. Due to Dr. Wilbur's intervention, Sarah's pregnancy proceeded, and for the next 2 months the two corresponded secretly. After her death, there were unsigned letters in a handwriting that could not be definitely proven to belong to Avery. There was a meeting planned for December 20th, 1832 in Fall River with an unnamed person. Only the initials B.H. were mentioned, which corresponded with Betsy Hill, Avery's niece. On that day, she left work at the mill, ate supper at the boarding house, and left a note that read, "If I should be missing, inquire of the Reverend Mr. Avery of Bristol. He will know where I am. December 20th, S. M. Cornell." She was found dead the next day. The hasty verdict of suicide was rescinded once a bandbox where she kept correspondence was found. Her body was exhumed. Once Sarah's death was investigated as a murder, the unsigned letters pointed to a perpetrator close to her. One cautioned her not to address her letters to the writer, as he suspected that one of the missives had been opened before he received it. It directed her to send them to Betsy Hill, Avery's lame niece who lived in his home. During the trial, it was pointed out that this would afford Avery an excuse to take out any letters addressed to Betsy. Another letter laid out a place of assignation to talk over her situation. Sarah's last note and the testimony of Dr. Wilbur laid the murder at Avery's feet. At the second inquest, a verdict of willful murder against Reverend Ephraim K. Avery was rendered. This was a serious accusation since he was a Methodist minister with a wife and several children. He was arrested. Witnesses were questioned, among them the engineer of the steamboat King Philip, who took a letter to Sarah from Avery, which he had instructed to be given directly into her hands. Another Methodist minister, Ira Bidwell, who first described Sarah as a virtuous girl, distanced himself from her. Unclaimed by her family or any Methodist congregation, the Fall River Congregationalist Church buried her as an indigent. It didn't help there was hostility against the Methodists at that time in Fall River. The populations of Massachusetts and Rhode Island were mostly Congregationalist and were suspicious of the Methodist Episcopal Church that some equated with Freemasonry. Avery's trial commenced in May 1833. The church hired 6 lawyers to defend Avery. There was a parade of witnesses for either side, 68 for the prosecution and 128 for the defense. Avery's lawyers called into question Cornell's morals, describing her as utterly abandoned, unprincipled, profligate. They had witnesses testify about her promiscuity, mental instability, and expressions of ending her life. She had once contracted gonorrhea, which became known when the doctor that treated her came looking to be paid after she had left town without settling the bill. The prosecution portrayed the Methodist Church as dangerous and willing to defend their minister and the name of the church at whatever cost, even if it meant covering up a murder. After 16 hours of deliberation, the jury found Avery not guilty. He returned to the Methodist Church, but public opinion was against him. Effigies of the minister were hanged and burned, and he was almost lynched in Boston. Another letter from Sarah describing her relationship with Avery was found, and a deputy sheriff from Bristol County set off in search of the minister, who had slipped off secretly to New Hampshire. He was brought back to Rhode Island and the hostile environment of Tiverton. The Methodist Conference once more hired good lawyers to defend Avery. Sarah's body was exhumed a second time, and signs of an attempted abortion and or sexual abuse were found. It was now May 1833. The state also placed experienced lawyers as prosecutors, including D.J. Pierce, who gave up his seat in Congress to prosecute the case. The trial lasted 21 days and 238 witnesses testified. Among the indictments brought against Avery were that he had been moved and seduced by the instigation of the devil. The prosecution hoped to prove there was a relationship between Sarah and Avery and that he was the father of her child, as based on her confessions to the doctor. One of the witnesses was one of 4 women who had prepared Sarah's body for burial. She testified the woman had been dreadfully abused. When Dr. Wilbur took the stand and was asked about Sarah's confession, the defense objected the testimony was hearsay and not admissible. Another doctor who testified for the defense claimed that he believed Sarah was insane, but the defense pointed out that the good doctor was Avery's personal physician. Another doctor testified that Sarah's pregnancy was too far advanced for conception to have taken place during the Thompson Methodist meeting. An attorney for the defense declared that suicide, quote, may almost be called the natural death of the prostitute, and that if you were to seek for some of the vilest monsters and wickedness and depravity, you would find them in the female form, end quote. The defense claimed that Avery, a righteous man, was being framed by Sarah Cornell. Reverend Avery was found not guilty again. Avery went before the Methodist Conference for a third trial. Unsurprisingly, he was found not guilty of any offense. If found not guilty in a court of justice, in the court of public opinion, he was very guilty. On a trip to Boston, he was surrounded by hundreds of angry citizens. A ditty was made up about Reverend Avery. He killed the mother and then the child. What a wicked man was he. The devil helped him all the while. How wicked he must be. Hang him on a tree. Tie around him Avery's knot. Forever let him hang be and never be forgot. In other words, that Avery's knot was from then on of the knot that was used on Sarah's neck. It got named after him. Soon a, soon a play opened in various cities based on the crime. It was titled The Factory Girl or The Fall River Murder. The anger was not only against Avery but the Methodist religion. In 1834, Avery published Vindication of the Result of the Trial of Reverend Ephraim K. Avery, etc.,
which the Methodist Church collaborated with him on. Avery was suspended from the Methodist Conference in 1833 and he resigned in 1835. He left to New York and worked as a farmer. In 1851, he left to Pittsfield, Ohio, with wife, children, and his sister Nabby. Besides farming, he acted as a coroner since he had a medical education. Ephraim died in 1869 and Sophia, his wife, in 1876. The family is buried in the South Cemetery in Pittsfield. Durfee Farm, where Sarah was found, is the present-day site of Kennedy Park in Fall River. So this is another scenario where service kind of gets served, even if not by the legal system, because even though he was found not guilty, um, he suffered for it. He was nobody, in the court of public opinion, he was basically run out of town on a rail. And unfortunately, this girl, she set herself up for this because she had a bad reputation, but that doesn't mean that she couldn't have been murdered by him. But again, we come into that dichotomy. Well, if she was promiscuous, then she deserved to die, that's not good. And of course, you could tell that there was um, that thing between the religions, that Methodist versus the Congregationalists, and so they were not only attacking him, they were going after the Methodists as well. So there you go. Now let's. This is another story. This is out of a site called Anomelian, and this is titled "Disappearance of a Hiker Who Found a Vibrating Cave Near Area 51." Kenny Veach was a 47-year-old hiker and YouTuber who vanished in 2014 after exploring a strange cave near Area 51, the secretive military base in Nevada. Veach claimed that he felt a strong vibration coming from the cave, which was shaped like a capital M. He documented his findings on his YouTube channel and received many comments from curious viewers who urged him to investigate further. However, his third attempt to locate the cave proved to be his last, as he never returned from his expedition. What happened to Kenny Veach and what secrets did the cave hold? Area 51 is a well-known hotspot for conspiracy theories, as many people believe that it houses extraterrestrial technology and evidence of alien life. The base is highly guarded and restricted, and its activities are classified. Due to its extreme level of secrecy, Area 51 has attracted many adventurers and researchers who want to uncover its mysteries. One of them was Kenny Veach, who stumbled upon a peculiar cave near the base in 2014. Veach first mentioned his discovery in a comment on a video titled "Son of an Area 51 Technician" by Serious Disclosure, a group that studies UFOs and extraterrestrial phenomena. He wrote, quote, "One time during one of my hikes out by Nellis Air Force Base, I found a hidden cave. The entrance to the cave was shaped like a perfect capital M. I always enter every cave I find, but as I began to enter this particular cave, my whole body began to vibrate. The closer I got to the cave entrance, the worse the vibrating became. Suddenly I became very scared and hightailed it out of there." Veach's comment, end quote. Veach's comment sparked interest among other viewers, who asked him to provide more details and evidence of his encounter. Veach obliged and uploaded a video of his second hike to the area, where he tried to find the cave again. However, he was unsuccessful and only encountered some wildlife such as tortoises and rams. He also showed his viewers the rugged terrain and the proximity to the bombing range of Nellis Air Force Base. Despite his failure to locate the cave, Veach was determined to try again and planned a third expedition. Some of his followers encouraged him to do so, while others warned him not to go back or into the cave if he found it. One ominous comment read, "No, do not go back there. If you find that cave entrance, don't go in. You won't get out." Veach ignored the warnings and set out for his final hike on November 10, 2014. He brought along a 9mm handgun and a video camera and recorded his journey in a video titled "M Cave Hike." He told his family that he was going on a short overnight trip and that he would be back soon. However, he never came back. A few days later, his family reported him missing, and a search operation was launched. The authorities found his cell phone near an abandoned mine shaft, but there was no trace of him or his belongings. The search was hampered by the harsh weather conditions and the dangerous terrain. After several weeks of fruitless efforts, the search was called off. Veach's disappearance sparked many theories and speculations among his followers and other online communities. Some suggested that he had found the cave and entered it, only to be met with some unknown fate. Another possibility is that Kenny intentionally committed suicide. The fact that he seemingly abandoned his phone would seem to support this, as it would prevent him from being tracked. Shortly before his disappearance, he had quit his job to sell inventions, an endeavor that hadn't been very successful. His girlfriend reported that he did suffer from depression, and when asked if he would ever kill himself, he said that if he did, they would never find him. Those with a more conspiratorial mindset have suggested that Kenny was actually murdered by the government. Proponents of this hypothesis believe that the M cave Kenny discovered was an entrance to some sort of top secret government facility due to its close proximity to Nellis Air Force Base and Area 51. They believe that the vibrating sensation Kenny felt while near the cave was a defense mechanism to keep civilians from entering. Some even propose that he had faked his death or staged his disappearance for publicity or personal reasons. However, none of these theories have been proven or confirmed by any credible evidence or witnesses. The vibrating cave that Veach claimed to have found also remains elusive and unexplained. Some have theorized that it could be related to some high-tech device or experiment conducted by the military or some other entity near Area 51. For a long time, no one could find the cave, but after some time, the YouTube channel Exploring Abandoned Mines and Unusual Places posted the following video, which is there. But this video raised much more questions. Why was there wind coming out of that crack? Why was there wood planks inside this random cave miles away from anything? Why was there a nail in the rock? Why did someone try to block off this tiny cave if it's so obviously non-dangerous? Kenny Veach's body has never been found since he went missing in 2014. This has led to many conspiracy theories speculating what could have happened to the daring explorer. And there you go. You know, it's, when somebody's got that history of depression and he would have killed himself, he could have thrown himself down the mine shaft. I hate to say it, but that's a possibility. It's a possibility. All right, I'm going to do this one more short one. This is out of Unexplained Mysteries. This is pretty good. Hold on. And it's alleged sea monster shows up on Google Earth's image of Antarctica. The creature, whatever it is, has sparked some heated debate online, with many dismissing the image as a hoax. Given how little we know about the depths of the oceans around Antarctica, it is not unreasonable to assume that it is home to species of animals that we currently know nothing about. Whether this recent photograph is evidence of this, however, remains a matter of debate. The image, which appears to have been tagged to a location on Google Earth, shows a group of people, possibly researchers, in a boat off an island in Antarctica. As the camera pans around, however, the image of a large creature can be clearly seen in the water. While some users have hailed the picture as evidence of some sort of sea monster, what stands out straight away is the fact that the animal bears an uncanny resemblance to the Alaskan bullworm, a fictional creature found in episodes of the SpongeBob SquarePants cartoon. It certainly looks a little questionable, especially given the lack of any formal acknowledgement of the discovery from anyone in the boat and the fact that it looks like it had been digitally added to the shot. Okay, now, and the reason why I looked at this one is that this thing looks really, I mean, nowadays, unfortunately, you can, if you got even just a little bit of expertise, you can uh, put that in there. But you have to understand, this is like, it's like, what is that? I mean, it looks like a big tarp under the water with two, I don't know. But I guess if you want, what is it? What do they call it? Clickbait, something like that. All right. Now I'm gonna at the same site. This is another one. This is titled "Enigmatic New Snake Discovered, but it may already be dead." Around the world, natural history museums hold a treasure trove of knowledge about Earth's animal, but much of the precious information is sealed off to genetic scientists because formalin, The chemical often used to preserve specimens damages DNA and makes sequences hard to recover. However, recent advances in DNA extraction techniques mean that biologists can study the genetic code of old museum specimens, which include extremely rare or even recently extinct species. We harnessed this new technology to study a snake from the eastern highlands of Zimbabwe that was run over in 1982 and discovered it was a new species. Our research was recently published in PLOS 1. The eastern highlands of Zimbabwe, a mountain chain on the border with Mozambique, create a haven of cool and wet habitat surrounded by savannas and dry forest. They are home to many species that are found nowhere else. Here, a mysterious population of snakes first drew the attention of scientists around 1920. An unusual snake displaying a cobra-like defense hooding posture was spotted on the grounds of Cecil Rhodes' Inyanga estate in Nyanga. This snake had unusual markings with red skin between its scales, creating the effect of black dots on a red background when its hood was extended. None of the other cobras found in the area matched this description. More snakes like this were reported in the 1950s, but no specimens were collected. The mystery surrounding these sightings piqued the interest of the late Donald G. Broadley, now considered to be the most eminent herpetologist, which is a reptile and amphibian expert of southern Africa. In 1961, Broadley was given some severed snake heads and identified the mystery snake as a rinkals, a species otherwise only found in South Africa, Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland, and Lesotho. A handful of specimens were observed and measured in later years, but the landscape has been drastically altered by forestry. The rinkals from Zimbabwe has not been seen in the wild since 1988 and is feared to be extinct. This population lives 700 kilometers away from other more southerly populations, which made us suspect they may be a separate species, but the genetic material contained within the specimen from Zimbabwe was degraded, meaning we couldn't do the DNA studies needed to confirm whether it is a different species from other rinkals. However, the latest DNA extraction and sequencing methods have been developed over the last 10 years to help biologists study the remains of ancient animals. We used the new techniques to examine the Zimbabwe rinkal specimen. Our studies showed they represent a long isolated population, highly distinct from the southern rinkals populations. Based on their genetic divergence from the other rinkals, we estimate that the snake in Zimbabwe diverged from their southern relatives 7 to 14 million years ago. Counting a snake's scales can help identify what species it is. Subtle differences in scale counts revealed by our analysis of other specimens provided enough evidence to classify the Zimbabwe rinkals as a new species. The scientific name Nigenesis means from Nyanga in Latin. All right. Hermas Hemocodus niagenesis has fangs modified to spit venom. Crap. Although the behavior was not reported from the few recorded interactions with humans. The closely related true cobras, some of which are known to spit venom, do so with the same specialized fangs that allow venom to be forced forward through narrow slits, spraying it towards animals that are threatening them. Venom in the eyes causes severe pain, may damage the eye, can cause blindness if left untreated. Venom spitting appears to have evolved 3 times within the broader group of cobra-like snakes, once in the rinkals and twice in the two cobras in Southeast Asia and Africa. Scientists think this defense mechanism may have evolved in response to the first hominins. Tool-using apes who walked upright would have posed a serious threat to the snakes, and the evolution of spitting in African cobras roughly coincides with when hominins split from chimpanzees and bonobos 7 million years ago. Similarly, the venom spitting in Asian cobras is thought to have emerged about 2.5 million years ago, which is around the time the extinct human beings Homo erectus would have become a threat to those species. Our study of Nyanga rinkals suggests that the third time venom spitting evolved independently in snakes may also have coincided with the origin of upright walking hominins. If a living population of Nyanga rinkals was found, fresh DNA samples would help us to more accurately determine the timing of the split between the two species of rinkals and how this compares to hominin evolution. Technological advances may be giving us incredible insight into ancient animal lineages, but they can't make up for an extinction. We still hope a living population of Nyanga ring cows will be found. The possible relationship between venom spitting and our early ancestors is a reminder that we are part of the Earth's ecosystem. Our own evolution is intertwined with that of other animals. When animals become extinct, we just don't lose a species, they take part of our history with them. You know what? I beg to differ. This thing that they're timing it with Homo erectus and hominins, you know what? I'm sure that there were other creatures that would have tried to prey. There was plenty of predators that were preying on people or Homo erectus or prehumans or whatever, and snakes. So that thing of that they developed this venom spitting because of the threat, come on, stop that. Stop that. There was a lot of predators out there that would have eaten any of these snakes. That they developed spitting poison as a defense, absolutely. Absolutely. But let's not hang out on the poor humans, man. We get blamed for everything. So anyway, guys, I hope you like this last adventure into weird and unusual stories, and it's a weird world, but very interesting. And I will be back soon with another batch of what is it? We live in interesting times. We most certainly do, and we definitely live in interesting places all over the world. Till next time.